Call to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Garnes?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Woodall?
Here.
Councilmember Johnson?
Here.
Councilmember Strand? Here. Councilmember Wilson?
Here.
Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public presentations. This is the time for persons who wish to address the council on any matter not on this agenda and over which the council has jurisdiction. As such, a dialogue with the council or staff is not intended. Items requiring council action not listed on this agenda may be placed on the next regular agenda for consideration if the council directs, unless a finding is made by at least 2/3 of the council that the item came up after the agenda was posted and was of an urgency nature requiring immediate action. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. Welcome. All right. It's a party. Yep. Nice. Welcome.
This is only a small part of our group, representing our entire group. We are the Rio Dell Senior Exercise Group.
Nice.
Okay? And I have spoken before. The council has heard my requests for help, and we had been given that help thanks to the generosity of Nick there at the Chamber of Commerce. But our class is greatly beneficial. I could speak for everybody, but mainly I can speak for myself. I know that my shoulder injuries in the past from working out in the field as an electrician for over 40 years, neck injuries, shoulder injuries, and then you start to protect, and then you find out, well, later on you can't throw a football because you can't stretch up. Well, now my shoulders have gotten much stronger with a lot more flexibility. My posture is better.
Lovely.
I stand up better. So we're all experiencing great benefits from this class. This group here are all people, we're all seniors, of course, who have supported the community our entire adult lives. We worked in the sawmills. I know that two others of the ladies have actually worked in sawmills, as well as myself. And then teaching, postal workers, you name it. We've all contributed to the community, paid taxes. So we've been together for 10 years. This group has been active for 10 years, and mainly without even missing a beat. It's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for 10 years. We started at the church over here. Mm-hmm. Then we had to shift over to the school, and we lost the church. Well, then we lost that, shifted back over to the church again. That's back when I appealed for help here. Nick was so gracious as to help us and invite us over to Chamber of Commerce, where he asks little of us, really. We try to help where we can there at the chamber by staffing the chamber, but mainly it's his generosity that's been helping us. But our class is growing, and we're basically outgrowing the chamber there. We're continuously growing. A large section of the community is finding out the value of this exercise class. We are the only exercise class in Rio Dell, not just seniors, but the only exercise class. But anyway, it's time for us to have a community center for our use. If a community center or something that can be used for our exercise classes, something with spacious enough to hold 30, 35 people in an exercise class setting. But this center could also be used for many other things that would enrich the community. So that's why we're here. We wanted to appeal to you again to think about us when and if you have the ability to support our group in that way.
Absolutely.
So, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming in. Yeah.
Mayor Garnes, I know that we're not supposed to have a dialogue with
Knock yourself out.
the speakers, but I might invite you to contact Danco. When they were here last, at their last presentation, they said that they were building a community room, and it's open to the community. So that might be some kind of an interim thing for you.
Yeah, we'll make contact with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Also, it's, last couple of weeks, we had 20 people. And it just keeps growing every week.
Growing,
And
yeah.
That room, you know how big it is there. Not big enough.
And it's hot. And it's hot. Yeah. Thank you. We're out of
There
here
goes
now.
half the crowd.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Nick Angeloff, 156 Greenland Heights Roads, Mayor, Council. Couple of things. Basically, let's get the light post up as soon as we can. I know that Creations is good with having it reinstalled at this point, and that's where I'm at with it right now. The other thing is I implore you to start negotiating with the county to realize some tax benefit from the windmill project that may or may not happen. So, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
On the light post, where are you at? I mean, where is it at? This one? Is there been a cost associated with it? Is there been bids?
Not yet. I've asked Walland to take a look at it and give me an idea of how much it costs. They're pushing me off to Spencer Electric at this point to get an idea of the cost associated with it, and I'm just so we have an understanding of that at this point. So pulling in the favors that I can to reduce the cost to the city and see if we can get this thing done, and if need be, I'll write a grant for it just to get these lights up. So we just need it by Christmas time, that's it. And it doesn't even have to have a light on it as far as I'm concerned. Just need somewhere to plug it in, that's
Maybe
it.
something that string the light.
Here to there.
Yeah,
Deer
And a
and
plug.
reindeer
across the street,
across
yep.
the streets.
And the power.
And the power's on this side, so we could reverse the Christmas lights, and if we have power on that side of an outlet of some sort, we can make that so. But if it's on this side, it would be better. And like I said, we don't even need the light standard going over, although you got one on one side, it would probably look good to have the other on the other. But that's not my decision. I just want something to hang my Christmas lights from, please, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Would anyone else like to make a public comment? No? Okay, well, thank you. And we will move on to the consent calendar. Would anyone on the council like to remove anything from the consent calendar?
I'd like to move item 3.
Okay.
I'd like to remove one.
Okay. 3. Is there a motion to approve item, would anyone from the public like to remove anything from the consent calendar? No, hearing nothing, I
Mayor
would,
Garnes, I would move for approval of items 2 and 4 on the consent calendar.
is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Vote. Approved 5-0. And now, Councilmember Wilson. Strawn. Item number 1.
One.
Mhm.
So I just want to make note of page 4 and just make some comments about what took place here on August 15th
Okay.
down at the Journey.
Sure.
This was the third,
Point of order, Madam Mayor. The item before us is approval of the minutes, not a discussion of what took place as a result of those minutes. And there'll be ample opportunity during council reports to discuss what happened at the Journey Church.
well, I want to make note of this because the statement on the third paragraph says she noted that the first community outreach event would be held at the Journey Church on August 15th. Coordination with the brown bag, in addition to community resources staff and mobile team would be there.
Is there something in this paragraph that
Yes.
is incorrect relative to
Yes, because
when she said it? Not relative to what happened later, but relative to what, is there something in this paragraph that is incorrect? Because, let me just say.
this is not what happened, so.
That's not what happened, that's not what what's here is not what was said at the meeting?
Well, I think that we need some clarification about that, because I am not, her comment regarding was that we were going to have, that this would be the first outreach of the community and the first meeting of our community, and this really is not what happened.
Okay, well then, when we go into the staff reports and they talk about that, then that will actually be the time. But if what's in this paragraph isn't incorrect to when she said it, then the minutes as they stand are correct. And so we would then just move to approve the minutes. And then in the staff report, then we will bring up the issue of.
All right.
Okay. So may I have a motion to approve item 1 on the consent calendar?
I so move.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Have a vote. The vote is carried 4-1. Councilmember Strawn opposing, voting no. Councilmember Wilson, item 3.
This is in regards to Amanda Carter being as a third public member of the Nuisance Committee. And I just wanted to draw attention to it as a what do you call it? Consent calendar item. It doesn't get, unless we pull something, it doesn't get comment. And I just like to thank her for wanting to participate. I appreciate your willingness to be a servant of the community, and I'm certainly for approving this. I just wanted to bring that out so that it is publicly noted. And we thank you for that.
Really appreciate your support for it.
And thank you. And thank you. And so, we have a motion for.
I make a motion that we approve item 3.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Motion's carried 5-0. Staff reports. This is where we're going to hit it, Sue.
Thank you, Mayor
City
Carnes,
Manager.
members of the council. As was just previously mentioned, there was the Housing Assistance Workshop at the Journey Church back on Thursday of last week. Overall, the event went well. There was the typical assistance that is provided on that date regularly by the Community Resource Center in their food program and food distribution day. And it was the Community Resource Center that identified that date as a good time to reach out to the community. In addition, we put out every door direct mailer, as well as radio advertising to help try to promote the event, as well as a press release. However, the event was, according to the Community Resource Center, about average attendance. So I'm not sure that the radio advertising or the mailer was particularly effective in drawing additional people to that event. And what they suspected is just during this time of year, a lot of people are leaving town and sort of doing their thing, camping and whatnot. But overall it was successful. The county DHHS did bring their MIST team down, so that's a team that works with homeless populations, at-risk populations, gets them mental health services, direct services. They were out with the police department and directly going down to the river bar and other places like that where there are known homeless people and trying to get them signed up for services. In addition, there were multiple services available at the mobile outreach van. I want to thank Councilmember Strawn, who was there handing out flyers for the event and helping to kind of coordinate it. It was a little bit, an additional activity there that was a little chaotic at first. Overall, there was signups for Medi-Cal, there were signups for Section 8 housing, and various other services that the county provides. In addition, we held an additional workshop later that afternoon for people who needed additional assistance or special assistance right here at City Hall, and that was quite effective and was certainly well above and beyond the events that they've done before in the past. And we were able to get a number of people some direct assistance that they needed, as well as people who couldn't show up that morning. So overall, the event was successful. It certainly wasn't a huge draw, but we had a number of people and a good press coverage of the event as well. The next event will be on September 11th, and that will be at the county's regular mobile outreach event over at Fireman's Hall. Be a similar, basically the same setup as the event on Thursday.
Before you move on from that?
Yeah.
I mean, are you moving on from that now? Okay, before you move on from that.
Yeah, so I just want to say that there was a lot of confusion in the morning there, and I was disappointed that Sally wasn't in attendance, that Sally Hewitt was not there. I think that would have really solidified all of the people that were there. Mist was there. There's, of course, at our county level, a lot of departments who, do their own thing. And so to get the overall, it was a little confusing for the people. And then the food part was going on. So there was a lot happening. But yeah, Kyle was there, and Susie from the city was there. It was great to have, and our chief of police was there, which was fantastic because it was his day off and he was putting in his time. I wanted to ask you, Chief, how did the go when you went out to the camps and took some of the people from the county with you?
We didn't find as many homeless camps as I think they expected to find. We found 3 camps with a total of 4 people on the Scotia side of the river, downriver from the Freeway Bridge. The closest one was probably 200 yards away from the Freeway Bridge. Didn't find any upriver from the bridges, and I checked the area between the bridges on the north end of town and found a couple of camps, but no signs of any that had been occupied by these homeless.
Okay.
Good group of people that were not afraid to go weed through the bush and talking to people they found there. And there were a couple of good connections that were made.
Okay.
There's a 60-year-old woman living over there that I've known for a long time, and she was pretty anxious to get services and to get some help maybe getting a roof over her head. So that was one of the best contacts.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you, Kyle.
Just something additionally that's not on the report. Staff, I will be going to the Eel Russian River Commission meeting on Friday. The council may recall we had a presentation back in November from the representatives for the county on the Potter Valley project, and so we'll probably be scheduling another update on that here shortly in the next few meetings to bring the council up to date on the latest developments on that. With that, unless there's any other questions, I'll turn to the council.
Council, questions for staff?
Just, not a question, just a comment. You mentioned here you held 2 tours at the Humboldt 454, a cannabis cultivation company in Rio Dell. And I did attend that, and it was informative. I thought the gentleman, Mr. Jeffries, is doing an excellent job as far as a professional facility, and I was impressed with it. And if that's the that's the kind of operations we're going to have. I would like them to be like that, and let that be kind of a standard for other ones to measure up to in his professionalism and cleanliness, just following regulations. I think the chief was there as well. I know he was. And so that's just a comment.
Thank you. Julie?
Yeah, I just had a question for Chief. You mostly answered it in answering Sue's questions, but do we patrol the river bar very often? How often do we go down there for a patrol?
The officers who have the SUVs go down there fairly frequently. The officers who drive Tauruses don't.
You don't want to tow them out?
Yeah, I try and go down there, especially on really nice days, at least a couple times. And then when the guys are putting their boats in there to go fishing, I go down there and check because they leave their vehicles behind. So I often go down there and check and make sure they're tuning their wheels, floating out the wheels. We rarely go on the Scotia side unless we have some kind of call that goes for example, the other day, right before last, there was a pork shots fired on the river bar, and two officers went over to the sheriff's deputy and contacted somebody that we deal with on a regular basis over there. So.
Well, okay, one other question. I don't know if it's just my perception, but there seems to be a lot more homeless people than used to be in the area. Is there any problems that we're having associated with the homeless?
We have a large number of people who use the highly scientific term couch surf.
Okay.
We do not have a whole lot that can. And I'm not going to say that there aren't any, but I'm not aware of any that are currently camping within the city limits. I have to take that back. I may know one. They're not on the river bar, it's actually
Okay.
That being said, some of the people who couch surf are basically homeless, but kind of sleep wherever they can find room. Some of those people cause the most problems.
Mayor Garnes, point of order.
Yeah.
Just for the council and also for the staff on the other table, can we make sure that the mics are on when each
Absolutely.
individual council member
It is on. It's on.
Okay.
It's on.
I don't think we have the same kind of problems that most of the other cities do, including
Fortuna. You hear of Fortuna dealing with their transient population on a regular basis on the radio,
Yes.
and we don't really have those problems there.
Okay. The one other thing, there's a property owner down there, and we abated a issue last year on his property. Somebody had mentioned that they might be the same problems on that property this year. I just wanted to mention that.
I have not seen that this year, but that doesn't mean some of the transients are more adept at hiding themselves in the riparian vegetation than others. So I'm not going to say that there isn't anybody down there, but I don't know about it. And the issue we dealt with last year was a travel trailer. It was pretty right there in the face. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else have, any other council member have a question for staff? Would anyone in the public like to ask a question of staff? No. Okay. I think we will move on to PG&E. Lovely. Presentation of PG&E, power shutoffs and preparedness. Hello. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Allison Talbot. I'm your local government relations representative for PG&E. I've certainly stood before you before, though not all of you. I live in Eureka and work somewhat regularly with the city manager and staff, and am at your service if you have any questions or issues that I can help with ever. For tonight's presentation, one of my colleagues, Senior Public Safety Specialist Mike Weaver, is going to give the presentation. If there are any, I mean, I have to admit, usually he can answer every question, but if something comes up that he can't, I'll make sure and take notes and reply via the city manager if that's acceptable to you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will just turn it over to him right away. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison.
Hi, Mike. Thank
Good
you.
evening, council members. Again, my name is Mike Weaver, employees, city manager, Madam Clerk, and guests. It's certainly, PG&E certainly values the opportunity to come and cooperate and collaborate with you guys and your community on ideas and the efforts that PG&E is taking for our community wildfire safety program. We obviously know that over the last 2 fire seasons, the 2017-2018 wildfire seasons, that the utility companies, specifically PG&E, we must do more. We must do more based on the large devastating wildfires we've had over those last 2 years, the changing climate conditions that have occurred that allowed these fires to grow rather largely. So what we're going to show for you, and pardon my voice, it's been a long day. I came over from Reading at 3 this morning to train some of our contractors, so I'll try to get through this. But we got a lot of material in the community wildfire safety presentation. I'm going to try to breeze through it to allow plenty of time for questions and answers, so I'll just dive right into it. And our presenter doesn't work, so it's my finger. Okay, so as part of the community wildfire safety program, there's basically 3 buckets of information that make up that community wildfire safety program. And on the first slide, I'll explain these very briefly and go into them in more detail as we go through the slides. The first bucket of information as part of the community wildfire safety program is real-time monitoring intelligence. So obviously, in response to these fires, we had to stand up what we call our Wildfire Safety Operations Center that monitors our service territory during the summertime 24 hours a day, every day during the declared fire season, which is basically when CAL FIRE declares it, as early as April 1st until the first rains come. They constantly monitor new fire starts and alert us as the public safety specialists to engage with the firefighters in the incident, notify the agency cooperators that PG&E is responding so that we can make our lines safe, assist them in any way, shape, or form, and rapidly begin to, after the fire is controlled, to do our restoration and repair efforts. As part of real-time monitoring intelligence, we are expanding a network of PG&E weather stations and high-definition cameras throughout our service territory for early detection, and then also to share and collaborate the information that we receive from our weather stations to various agencies, and I'll explain those in detail as well. The second bucket there in the middle is our new and enhanced safety measures. We are enhancing and expanding our vegetation management clearances around all of our assets. That's nearly 5,500 miles of transmission lines and over 25,000 distribution miles in our higher fire threats areas. And when I say we're expanding and enhancing our vegetation efforts, we are going above and beyond the Public Resource Code Statute 4293 that on our distribution assets requires a minimum of 4 feet of clearance from any vegetation around our assets. But based on the changing climate conditions, the winds that we experienced in 2017 and 2018, 4 feet isn't enough. So we know more must be done. Conducting accelerated safety inspections, I just spoke to 130 contractors from as far away as British Columbia, the state of Washington and Oregon, who are here right now in your county, doing an expanded and accelerated inspection of all of our assets, which through the service area includes roughly 50,000 transmission towers and over 700,000 distribution poles. So we are going above and beyond our regular mandated CPUC inspections with additional inspections, which we completed by June 30th of this year prior to fire season. And we'll talk about that in detail as well. We disable automatic line reclosing of all of our circuit breakers and reclosers. Basically what that means is that when we have a momentary outage on our lines, automatic line reclosers immediately shut the line off. When they sense a momentary outage, it shuts it off. Well, to limit our customers' experiences of a sustained outage, after a period, depending on the device, a minute or 2, again, depending on the device, the automatic line reclosers will throw power back down the line to test to see if there's still a fault on it. Well, during fire season, if that line is brought to the ground during fire season and it doesn't start a fire the first time, if we shoot electricity down that line, we don't want to give a fire a second chance to start. So we disable all of our manually operated line reclosers at the beginning of fire season, which was April 1st of 2019. And we'll explain that in detail as well. And then, of course, the elephant in the room, the public safety power shutoffs. We'll go into more detail with that. And then system hardening and resiliency is the last bucket of information. And this is our longer term, 10, 15-year efforts at hardening our system, replacing wooden poles, going to coated power lines, non-wooden cross arms going to poly, a type plastic cross arm, so we don't have line failures on a cross arm if there's a fault between the conductor and the insulator that might catch the cross arm on fire. We're working with communities to develop resiliency zones, and again, we'll go into detail there in a minute. The CPUC high fire threat map for your community in Rio Dell. There is a picture in the slideshow here talking about the CPUC fire threat district, but basically there are 3 fire threat districts. There's a Tier 1, a Tier 2, and a Tier 3. A Tier 1 area is generally an area that doesn't experience large fire growth. It has an increase in population, agriculture, urban sprawl, concrete jungles, if you would, where just fires really don't grow. The majority of your community is in a Tier 1 area because you are in a valley that, again, doesn't experience large fires, and your city is mostly urban for the most part. There are a few small areas of Tier 2, which is in the lower southwest corner of your jurisdiction. Tier 2 and Tier 3. Tier 3, I'll just say, for the county of Humboldt, there are 2 main areas of Tier 3, and that is the Willow Creek, Hoopaw area, and the Bridgeville area on Highway 36. So those are your 2 high fire threat districts in the county. Again, the tiers were developed in collaboration with all of the independent operating utilities, San Diego Gas and Electric, Southern Cal Edison, and PG&E, based on data we received from CAL FIRE, which is 100 years of fire history, fuel, weather events, number of people, amount of infrastructure, which bleeds into that Tier 1, 2, 3, Tier 3 areas. So as you see, the majority of your area is in a Tier 1 area. And the big thing to mention about this as we move on in the slide is that our proactive public safety power shutoffs affect the Tier 2 and Tier 3 areas. However, some of those assets, you have a 60 kV transmission line that feeds the substation here at Rio Dell, south of town. It's tied in with the whole 60 kV transmission line that ties all of the communities together. When we have to shut that line down in a Tier 2 area, even though you're in a Tier 1 area, citizens in Tier 1 areas will be affected simply because your source is that 60 kV transmission line. So just because you're in a Tier 1 area does not mean you would be exempt from experiencing a public safety power shutoff. We talked about the Community Wildfire Safety Operations Center. Again, that's a combination of PG&E employees, retired or current fire service personnel that left their jobs to come to work for PG&E. Those folks in there have knowledge of distribution, transmission, gas assets, and then those fire personnel are able to help those folks in understanding the threat of these new fires that occur. Again, that's located in San Francisco on the 15th floor of our general headquarters there in San Francisco. Weather stations. The thing to note about the weather stations is by 2022, we hope to have 1,300 weather stations, or we will have 1,300 weather stations, pole top, distribution pole, weather stations throughout our service territory, and that's basically 1 per every 20 miles of our circuits. So those weather stations are incredibly useful in determining real-time intelligence of weather and outage-producing winds when public safety power shutoffs occur. We're not simply going to rely on the National Weather Service, your Channel 7 news guy. They're always right? Right. But it's pretty easy to do the weather here, right? It's cold and foggy. I live in Redding, and it's hot and dry. But anyway, there are approximately 20 installed weather stations within Humboldt County, and at the end of the meeting, I can give you the locations of those. All of those weather stations are available to all the wildfire agencies, CAL FIRE, the Forest Service, BLM, any jurisdiction that would like to observe the weather from the nearest weather station from that mesowest.utah.edu. It's just a public website. You can pull up a map of PG&E weather stations, pick the closest one to you, and these are updated every 5 minutes. Being a retired fire chief from CAL FIRE for 33 years down in the valley, we had BLM weather stations. They gave us the weather an hour ago. Not really helpful when you're doing planning and intelligence on an incident. So this is a great use to our wildland agencies. And again, everything PG&E is doing, we are not doing it for us, the company itself. We are trying to cooperate and collaborate with the wildfire agencies that help us in the time of need when our infrastructure is threatened during a wildland fire. The 600 high-definition cameras by 2022, there's currently 4 high-definition cameras here in Humboldt County. That's coupled with the 5 cameras that CAL FIRE operates out of their command center in Fortuna. And those, again, are just installed for early detection of a new fire start. If we get the report of a fire on Highway 101 in Garberville, we can pull up the nearest camera, pan over, see if we can see a smoke, and react accordingly. Again, those cameras as well, we are going to, in the near future, as soon as the company that installed them figures out the software for a state agency to remotely operate them themselves. We want to give the wildland agencies the opportunity to control those cameras as well, because they're the ones that receive the 911s. Briefly on this slide here, the expanding and enhancing vegetation management clearance. You see the 4-foot circles around the conductors and the crossarm there. That's the Public Utility and Public Resource Code, Section 4293, mandated clearance of 4 feet. Well, we know when we have outage-producing winds, just like in 2017, where we had winds clocked at over 90 miles an hour in Santa Rosa, tree branches that are well outside of the 4 feet clearance can fly, break, buck off, fly into our conductors. So what we're doing is expanding it to exceed the state's minimum requirements for 12 feet radius around the conductors on both sides, and we're also removing any overhead vegetation directly over the lines so that we won't get a routine branch fall from, just a catastrophic failure from the just the tree itself as trees fail.
And you're doing that now, that's not a plan.
We are doing that now, and how we're doing that is we're targeting the Tier 3 areas first, the highest fire threat areas, which include Willow Creek and Bridgeville.
Is that high voltage lines only?
That's all lines, all lines.
Okay.
But that's 7,100 miles of distribution lines throughout our service territory. That's what we're targeting first. We know on our transmission lines, we have big right-of-ways. You could land a plane on them if there wasn't power lines on it. But distribution is much different. It falls under a different regulatory category. Being a young fireman, I remember rights-of-ways, and maybe some of you in the room remember there used to be clear right-of-ways under distribution lines. People love their trees in California. They love their vegetation. Cities love to put trees on their sidewalks right near our lines. It's become a problem. So we're working to enhance that. You'll see those shaded trees, the kind of orangish trees on the outside. That's representing, there's about 10 non-native species of trees, to include eucalyptus, certain oaks, that are not native to California and are susceptible to failure. And even though they're outside of our right-of-way, they do pose a risk of falling, in which they could hit our assets. And we are working with homeowners, property owners, communities to remove those non-native trees that could become a problem later on when we experience outage-producing winds. Again, I talked briefly about the wildfire safety inspections of all of our assets. And basically, the only thing here is this is above and beyond our regulated, mandated inspections that we have to do every year. Specifically, I noted that by June 30th of this year, we had completed inspections on 100% of 700,000 distribution poles, over 25,200 line miles. This is where we bought contractors from all over the United States and Canada to help us do that while our regular PG&E employees are doing the mandated work. Unfortunately, as a result of the Camp Fire, where we experienced a catastrophic failure, a very small part failure on a large transmission line, that involves 5,500 line miles and roughly 50,000 towers, where we are going above and beyond climbing and inspecting all those assets. Again, the inspections, how they basically occur is we're using helicopters, drones, visual ground inspections. We're really doing them twice. As we have one crew come through, we have another crew come through, either helicopter or drone, and they take high definition imagery, and all of that imagery is sent, by however, it's sent back to San Ramon, where our main wildfire inspection program is going, and we have qualified electrical workers that get to see this high definition images as this helicopter flies over at about 55, 60 miles an hour, and they could pinpoint a missing bolt. It's incredible what they could see, but again, with all those line miles using helicopters and drones, it's just unbelievable to go in that room and see about 400 people in there with monitors everywhere and computers, and are writing tags for work that needs to be performed. As they find emergency work, it is completed right away, and then B tags and C tags are work that can be done at a later date or a routine date. But it's very, very impressive. We did talk about the maintenance and repairs. When we find a tag, which is an emergency repair, it's corrected right away. And all the rest of them are logged and are taken care of on a routine maintenance. System hardening and resiliency. Again, we're really targeting those Tier 3 areas, which are 7,100 line miles of distribution assets. And again, the system hardening is the replacing wooden poles with steel poles, fiberglass poles, replacing cross arms with poly or fiberglass cross arms. We're taking the cross arms and making them longer to spread the power lines apart so that a bird's wings can't hit them, a tree branch can't cross phase and hit 2 lines at one time. We're using what we call tree wire. It's coated power lines in our highest fire threat areas. Really, a coated power line is if something contacts our line, it won't ground out because it's insulated. So in the Camp Fire, we replaced 4 circuits, and that was roughly about 900 miles with all tree wire. So it's very expensive, very hard to work with, but very much needed in our highest fire threat areas. We talked briefly about the line reclosers. This year, or actually in 2018, we've upgraded 450 reclosing devices to be automatic. That's SCADA, where they can be controlled by a system operator. And then this year in the 2019 wildfire season, we're working to restore 300 of those to make them all automatic. And what that means is, again, we want to limit the customers experiencing a sustained outage. So what we do for those manuals, there's very few left now in 2019, where we just disable them before fire season. But every morning, our meteorology department gets together at 0600 in the morning, 6 a.m., and they look at the fire threat, the risk for fires in our geographic area, and they determine if it's a high fire threat day, extreme weather, we disable all the line reclosers. And we could do that automatically by a couple switches of buttons. So that's all in an effort to reduce a down power line from starting a fire after that power line has fallen down. Okay, again, like I said, the elephant in the room is the public safety power shutoff. I want to preface this by saying is that, not that this makes it right, but in 2007, I was actually on the Witch Fire working for CAL FIRE, where a fire occurred under the Santa Ana winds. Winds were gusting over 80 miles an hour, and a tree well outside of the right-of-way of a transmission line in San Diego broke and then bucked out of the tree and flew like a sail, brought a transmission line down. The fire burned nearly 35,000 acres, burnt a couple thousand homes, and killed 12 people. After that fire, the Public Utilities Commission came to San Diego Gas and Electric and said, well, you knew the wind was blowing, why didn't you turn the lines off? That's never been done before. So San Diego Gas and Electric has been doing public safety power shutoffs since 2008. They've been doing them on an average of 5 to 9 times a year. PG&E just implemented this program last year about shutting the power off when we have outage-producing winds, increase in temperatures, and low humidities. We've had 3 events, and we've actually shut the power off twice, once in 2018 and once in June of this year, and we'll talk about that more in detail. But again, what I want to say about this slide, it is not a single event or a single criteria that determines a public safety power shutoff. It's a combination of a red flag warning being declared by the National Weather Service. We obviously have to have low humidities and dry fuels. We will not have public safety power shutoffs when it's raining in the wintertime. And we will have forecasted winds that exceed, generally sustained above 25 miles an hour with gusts over 45 miles an hour. Now those gusts over 45 miles an hour are what we call outage producing winds. That's where lines could slap together in certain areas. I could certainly say in Humboldt in the North Valley, that's Redding, which is the strongest system because you guys experience a lot of storms, so our power poles are stronger, our lines are larger, they're spread farther apart so they won't slap together. In the Central Valley, in the Redding area, we have extreme heat, power lines sag, they're just metal. When they get hot, they sag, which gives them more leeway. So we've taken those same hardening efforts in the Redding area, again, not only because of the climate conditions, but also the fire risk. And then prior to that, all of this criteria of low humidities, winds, red flag warning, dry available fuels, prior to us actually making that decision, we're actually going to deploy, it's really tough to gauge weather. You know, we'd love to say we're going to know a public safety power shutoff 72 hours out. Unfortunately, in June, we had a 25-hour I would say a 24-hour confidence that the winds were going to materialize to be outage producing. So we'll run and put qualified electrical workers in the field to actually evaluate the weather conditions as well as those weather stations to make sure those winds are materializing. And again, when they reach those thresholds, we're going to be shutting off the power before that. We don't want to wait until those outage producing winds occur to start shutting the power off. Again, the public safety power shutoff will affect the Tier 2 and Tier 3 areas mainly. That's the map of the state of California. This is the CPUC fire threat map. However, the caveat to this is that we created this map in collaboration with the CPUC and CAL FIRE January 1st, 2018. Took us 2 years. Well, we put in our system about 100 years ago. So our power lines do not reside solely in a Tier 1 or a Tier 2 or a Tier 3. So the example of this transmission line passes in Tier 2 into Tier 1, back out into Tier 2. So if that line gets shut off because it's a Tier 2, it's going to affect a Tier 1 area. And more than 50% of PG&E's service territory over 48 counties is actually in a high fire threat Tier 2 or Tier 3 area. Event notifications, I'll talk about this very briefly. Prior to a public safety power shutoff event, we are going to notify emergency officials, the elected officials, and the customers. But we will give you our word that the first people to be contacted are the emergency officials and the elected officials. The last thing we want to do is notify the customers and then have them call the police chief, the fire chief, and the mayor and go, hey, they're shutting off our power. So we try to shoot for a 48-hour notice. Again, that's only the confidence of the weather. If we have a great meteorological department, the National Weather Service and the predictive services for CAL FIRE and the Forest Service, we all collaborate together very closely. But again, in June, we only had a 24-hour notice. But at 48 hours, we're going to notify the elected officials, the emergency officials, to advise them what areas will be affected, circuits, number of customers that may be affected, and then the communication is going to really increase on this 24 hours and 12 hours, 6 hours, and then really every 4 hours thereafter. With the customers, again, after the main people are notified of the event, we're going to begin to do Send Word Now, which is a paging system in which we ask all of our 5.5 million customers to go onto PG&E's website and update their contact information. Our customers will receive texts, emails prior to the power being shut off to describe the events that are going to occur, just as we are going to describe to you folks personally by phone, by a talking human being, to answer your questions for the communities that are affected. And then again, throughout the whole process, we will hold updates to not only the customers and to the elected and emergency officials. When we restore power, again, when we shut the power off, we lose all eyes and ears on our system. When that wind event comes and we shut the power off, again, we have no idea if a tree brought down a power line, if we have branches laying cross phase on conductors, that when the power is restored, it'll arc, fall to the ground, and start a fire. So what has to happen is when we get the all clear for those power lines that are shut down, we have to inspect every single line mile to make sure that there is no trouble as a result of those outage-producing winds. We bring in the troops. If we have 48 hours of notice, we're bringing crews in from unaffected areas and staging those in the areas that are affected so that when we get the all clear, they hit the streets. And basically what they do is they hit the transmission lines first because that's the source. They could fly those by helicopter because they're usually point to point, a substation, transmission substation to substation. We'll fly those, make sure they're good, restore the substations, and then we will work from the substations out onto the distribution lines to start re-energizing power. And we do that in a manner that we know who our critical customers are. That's the police station, the fire station, the school, the community service center, if that's one of your evacuation areas. It's certainly going to be the water treatment plants. If we restore power on a distribution line, we can go right and restore 500 customers, or go left and restore a fire station, a police station, the supermarket, and the water treatment. We're going to the left. So we always target the critical customers first, which we know of. As we go across and find damage, we repair that damage right away. That could delay the amount of time it takes to repower after a public safety power shutoff. Obviously, if there's damage, we got to fix it. We'll try to isolate it and then back tie it through other sources. Then we'll restore power and notify all the customers. The elected officials and emergency officials will have access to a portal, a public safety portal, where you will have access to all the outage area maps, the circuits that are affected, the number of customers, number of medical baseline customers. You will have full access to everything that's going on and regular updates as to the progress of restoration. And I'll just simply say, out of that last event where we de-energized nearly 27,000 customers in 6 counties, we restored the power over about 900 line miles in 6 hours. Everybody was restored in 6 hours. So we were just lucky that we didn't have significant damage along the way. But of course, damage is going to delay the restoration times. Working with our customers to prepare, this is the last slide. Again, 5.5 million customers that we serve throughout our service territory in 48 counties. When we first introduced the public safety power shutoff in 2018, which only involved distribution assets, we sent mass mailing to our customers and said, go online and update your information. We had roughly 37,000 people do so. So it's these campaigns and with your assistance for members of the community to go to pgne.com/wildfire safety, and it will map you to an area that you can provide home phone number, cell number, email address to be notified. If some of your constituents don't have cell phones, they can list a family member who can drive, or if they don't have email, they can list somebody else's email, they can run it. But again, we really need to have everybody sign up so that we can notify everybody and keep them advised and apprised of all the elements of our public safety power shutoff. And again, here's the slide that talks about the pgne.com wildfire safety. There's a lot of information on that website, Wildfire Safety, that talks about public safety power shutoffs, what to do, how to prepare. Gives direction to medical baseline customers, not only what to do in an event, but maybe to communicate with family members to extricate them and take them to a community that will not be affected. Lots of great information. So we encourage everybody to go onto the website for that. So that was a lot of information in a very short time. I want to open it up to any questions.
Thank you. That was a very good presentation.
Cell phone communication. Are the cell phone towers?
Can I do this part?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to open it up to council. I'm sorry. If council has questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Garnes. Early in your presentation, you said that you had 1,200 contractors out marking trees and whatnot. Chatted with a young man who was one of your contractors today. He was 100 feet from my house, tagging white flagging on some trees.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's probably 40 homes that lie in that distribution little network. When can I expect to see somebody down there with a chainsaw and a chipper?
Hopefully very soon. Very soon. The vegetation management side, we have nearly hired everybody in the 11 western states to come to California to do our vegetation management work. And that's as well as Southern California Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric. San Diego Gas and Electric is more desert, so not so much with them, but I'm not familiar with what veg management is doing here in the community, but I'm sure Allison, who's very engaged in this area, can go to our veg management lead and talk about the the priorities and territories that they are working in. However, they're primarily working Tier 3, those three communities, Hoopaw, Willow Creek, and Bridgeville, and then moving into the Tier 2 areas. But they're all over the place. Yes.
A white mark might mean that is routine work, and so that will be through Travis's group. And if you're comfortable with me having your street address, or even just the general vicinity, I can find out probably a pretty good indication of when.
165 Sequoia.
Beautiful. Perfect. He's a public servant. Everybody's got his information. Yeah, veg management is certainly our Achilles heel.
So when you talk about the outage and we're a Tier 1, can you tell us what line we're hooked to and how far is that going to be turned on?
Well, it's all weather dependent. We need that crystal ball to, determine how many times a year would Humboldt actually experience a public safety power shutoff. But the big concern for you guys is that you're on a 60 kV line tap. The main line is on the other side of the hill, about maybe 2 miles, maybe a mile to the east of us. And this tap comes all the way through the community and ties into the substation there by Scotia. If that 60 kV line is de-energized because of fire conditions in Garberville and we can't back tie it from Eureka or the Humboldt Bay power generation plant or the 60 kV line that comes from Redding to Eureka, you're going to be dead in the water. All the lines.
All of Humboldt would be down.
Oh no, not all of Humboldt. No, this is a very Humboldt County is a very strange county for the fact that you're fed three ways. You're fed from transmission lines from Highway 299 from Cottonwood in Redding. That's the big substation. It comes up Highway 299. It comes up Highway 36 West, and it comes up from the south in a 60 kV line. If two of those three things fail because of fires, the Helena fire in 2017 took out 4.5 miles. The Carr fire took 14 miles of our transmission lines out last year. If those two fail We hope and pray that the Humboldt Bay Power Generating Plant can come up online with the generators and restore power in all of the Tier 1 areas. And I don't want to stand up here and say I hope, but it's never been tried before. The system has never been tested to that degree. So it is the plan that if what's more likely to happen for you folks is a public safety power shutoff in the Central Valley that brings all your power over. If there's a widespread public safety power shutoff in Shasta County, that's going to affect every line coming your way. They would bring up the Humboldt Bay Power Generating Plant and then try to restore all of the power in Humboldt if there's no PSPS event occurring here.
When they do emergency planning, so is there not a way to actually plan that to shut down and bring it, like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to have an emergency test on this day at this time, and you're going to all lose power, we're going to shut down, and we're going to see if Humboldt Bay can bring you up? Is that not a thing that
no, that does
done?
occur. That does occur. However, if the two 115 kV lines, the large transmission lines that come Highway 36 and Highway 299, that is a big, huge source. What's never been tried is can 60 kV bring up the generators and maintain that level to keep the heart of Humboldt County going, which is basically
sustained?
Sustained, absolutely. Again, it's designed to do that. It's just never been tried and tested. It's never been tried and tested. We will never take two lines down unless it's brought down by fire. It's just too risky.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Where do you bring it in from the south?
It comes up from the south all the way from Ukiah. So really it comes out further south. It comes off the Lakeville substation in Petaluma. So that 60 kV line follows Highway 101, kind of meanders back and forth through Highway 101 and ties into the Eureka substation.
You're connecting your 60K from Ukiah all the way up to Eureka? You've got a
That's
60K
correct.
line down?
That's correct, yes. So it's fed by a number of transmission substations along the way. I think the last transmission substation that's fed by a 230 kV line is out of Ukiah. So then it's 60 kV all the way up here to back tie into Eureka.
But it ties into Humboldt Bay?
That is correct.
There is a connection between
Absolutely.
Ukiah and Humboldt Bay?
That is correct, yes. Yes, sir. Every transmission line ties into Humboldt Bay.
How does it work in the sense that where Humboldt Redwood is over here, if they are generating and are you able to open areas? Because that feeds into this your 60K over here. Can you bring that out and isolate, say from Hydesville back, or from certain areas and isolate?
Is that during a public safety power shutoff, or
in those
Central
types of
Valley
situations?
Yeah, in that situation where the Central Valley is affecting you because they have a public safety power shutoff.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to talk to Tim Nix, our transmission superintendent, because I'm very unfamiliar with the cogen plant that's over here. I don't know enough about the cogen plant to really answer that question. But
Because in the past, they generally opened up when you had problems, and Allison can speak more to this, but if there was problems within the area, say in the winter, they would actually isolate Scotia. Even though they were up, they would isolate them. They'd say, we want you to open your switch. In the event if there was a catastrophic thing over here, it would draw everything down and pull everybody down.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, that's
But I'm asking, can you isolate segments of your 60K?
Yes.
So that you could feed that from?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's ties between distribution substations. We can isolate Scotia on its own system. Again, I can't speak on behalf of the cogeneration plant, but yes, we can isolate the 60 kV transmission feed to feed certain areas and isolate it from any other substations. Absolutely. And since you have this ability to back tie, because that's at the end of the line, that certainly seems logical. But again, I'm not familiar with the system and how it's tied together.
Thank you. Anyone in the public? I'm sorry I cut you off, Rick.
Thank you.
Go.
My other question was about PG&E would communicate with me, for example, on my cell phone. Are the cell phone towers independent of PG&E?
Yes. I'll talk about that. We do community-wide workshops throughout all the counties. We recently, I think our last one was our open house. It was at Riverwalk. The open house was at Riverwalk
Workshop
with Jeff Lee recently. So to answer your question, we have brought all of the cell companies into the fold of this public safety power shutoff community wildfire safety plan and made sure that the cell companies are prepared for when we shut the power off, that they have backup external generation to keep all the cell towers working, primarily for the police chief to receive 911s if he's the public safety answering point of the fire department, through cell calls. But yes, every cell company has upgraded their systems in response to have longer generation runtimes, larger generations, to keep the cell towers up and running. Yeah, we haven't done this alone. We brought them into the fold, and they come to nearly every single one of our workshops so they could speak on behalf of Sprint, AT&T, and Verizon. That is Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
There's a lot of talk about this Terragen putting on these windmills up on the hill and generating out. How would that apply to the backup system if that were to be done? How would that apply to this?
Well, again, I'm unfamiliar with this project you're talking about, but we have the windmill farms on the Hatchet Mountain just between Bernie and Redding, and the generation that those provide is a collaborative effort between private industry and the utility companies to provide more green power, because we're trying to reduce our footprint over the long term. They just feed into the system, but they're not a source. They're not a power source. So we don't depend on them to do what the cogen plant at Humboldt, Redwood?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not a cogen plant. They just feed into the system to increase or decrease our energy footprint and just provide into the network with green energy.
So they're not, for them being independent by themselves, they're not able to really sustain what you need.
That's correct. That's correct. And again, I don't know the wattage of the system and really how it applies, but again, they're just providing power, green energy to reduce utilities' footprint on the earth of producing power.
There's
Fossil
supposed to be a
fuels.
100 megawatt. Got rates built.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Mike? Go ahead, Nick.
Weasel something in too, sorry. From Councilmember Wilson, so I got my question there. PG&E has grants. How would you guys feel about something to do with installing a power pole out here?
This guy wants his Christmas lights.
Wow.
Late to the table, but the estimate is somewhere around $10,000 to Caltrans standards.
Boy, talk about
I know. I kind of got to stop you, Nick. I feel bad about it. But
Installation, so there you go, you got an answer. I know you guys have a grant program. I'd like to apply to it.
I'll tell you,
But excuse me, pardon me. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Nick. I'm sorry, Nick.
You
Gotta be fair.
Right outside the door.
So,
I want to come here on Christmas. I want to see the Christmas lights. They better blind me when I get here. Oh my gosh,
Thank
it's beautiful. Can't see it.
thank you. Is there any other questions regarding this presentation? No. Well, I thank you, Mike. Thank you, Allison, for coming. Thank you for explaining to us. It was a great presentation. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. And now,
You're welcome.
thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, guys.
on to the discussion and possible action of authorizing staff to issue a request for proposal related to City Hall backup power.
Thank you, Mayor Garnes, members of the council. Just quickly, on page 45 of your packet is the agenda item. With the council's direction, the request is to get council direction to go ahead and issue an RFP to install and reconfigure the power interface on City Hall here to allow for future upgrade to a solar PV system, but also to allow for a mobile generator to be hooked into the building, or also a permanent setup for a generator. So we've had the city engineer take a look at the system and what's needed, and basically what he's recommending is that the hookup at City Hall needs to be replaced anyways. It's past its useful life. It's original to the building, which was built about 44 years ago. We don't have a cost estimate for it, but we do have a new mobile generator that can be hooked up to the new design. In addition, they did some analysis on the power loads for this building, and the engineer came up with a maximum power use of 14 kilowatts. So if the council wants to further direct, we can also look into the cost of adding a stationary generator. But right now, what our goal was is just to simply create the interface so that we could hook a generator, not necessarily the city's backup generator, but any generator, mobile generator, into the building. So if there's any other questions from the council?
Yeah. Okay, I read this over, and the generator that the city has is way more powerful than what you need to run in City Hall.
Right.
And for the size of that, this is strictly my opinion, but the right way to do this is that the city would put in a permanent 14, 20 kW, whatever it takes that's more than adequate, one, to bring your police department, your city staff. In an emergency situation, your public works are going to be busy with their vehicles to grab hold of those generators. If they don't need the generator, maybe they need it over at Metropolitan, maybe they need it down at the yard, and for them to take the vehicles away from whatever the emergency is, to bring a generator here, to go out and rent one that's not ours would seemingly be not a doable situation. But to have something permanently installed that would simply has transfer switches. As soon as you lose power, you instantly have police department. The fire department, I think, would be on there. That would be there for them to take care of themselves. But that would allow your city and police department to continue to function pretty much seamlessly, and being like on natural gas rather than gasoline or diesel, in a cleaner atmosphere. So that I would request that the city at least get a price on that, so they can show that as an option to the council. What they, make a prudent decision.
I agree with that too. A permanent, that's what we had at the offices, the hospital. As soon as it went off, they would just kick on. They were permanent, and they're not all that expensive, but even the doctor's offices had them. And my question was, so for if this happens, if they're going to shut us down, and so let's say there's an elderly 85-year-old man out there who's on oxygen, who plugs in, will they be able to come here? Are we going to where are they going to go? What's going to happen to these emergency I'm just thinking.
Right. Well, this agenda item is specific to the generator, but really what has underscored the whole preparation for public safety power shutoffs has been personal preparedness and preparedness of your neighbors and being aware of who might need assistance during those events. Ultimately, if somebody's on equipment that, and there's no power, they need to be taken really to the hospital, to a location that has power, which likely would be a hospital. And so that becomes kind of a fire department issue and again, personal preparedness issue. So in light of the personal preparedness, what we're trying to do is make sure that the city itself is prepared. Public Works is very well prepared. Public Works is more prepared now than it's ever been for these type of events, and can produce water independent of the power grid and can also process that water independent of the power grid. But the one weak area we do have is this building. Potentially the power outages could be 2 days, which would also be kind of unprecedented, but they could be significantly longer, 5 days, 7 days, depending on a lot of factors that are totally out of anybody's control. So that impact is potentially to billing, to all kinds of different functions in the city that really are critical to the stable operation of the city.
And just to add a comment that the gentleman from PG&E was talking about the tier 1s, us being affected by the tier 2 and 3. When they talk about the lines coming over from 36 and 299, I'm not too familiar with the one coming from south, but the Cottonwood lines come across some pretty rough terrain. And if 299 has had fires, if in the event you have a major catastrophe and you only got to burn down a couple poles, and you don't have, that breaks the link. And until that can be repaired, then there is no avenue other than this, possibly what can take place in Humboldt County, Humboldt Bay. So I know Rio Dell was at one time, I'm going to say, before I was on the council, but so it's good, probably 10 years ago, we were down 3 or 4 days. Part of it, it's broken half. It gets fed from 2 directions here, but the southern end of Rio Dell was out for the better part of a week while they were dealing with the next priority. So you have to anticipate that this could be it could be a long period of time, and you do need to have something to sustain us in it.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, in light of the presentation we just had, I think we need to do that. We need to be prepared. We also need to have a plan for all of that. At some other point, we can talk about that.
I concur.
We all concur. That's a miracle. Okay. Public, is there anyone who would like to make a comment?
An emergency preparedness generator, 15 kW, would sound advisable. But on the other hand, if that same money were used on solar cells, and then the use of LED lighting, and then only use the loads that would be considered emergency, such as the police department, and certainly not the lighting in this room. Get by with 5 kW. And it is possible, or it might be worth considering, to think about spending the money on a solar array on the building that would be used continuously, and not only that, would have a payback period. At a certain point, it would have itself paid for, and then you wouldn't have to worry about whether the PG&E was on or off at that point. These loads would be taken care of on a continuous basis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this issue? No? Okay, so I think that you have direction from the council. We all agree that we should look at a permanent kind of a situation, and I think of course the solar there are a lot of things that have to be updated in this building before that could be done anyway, but I think this is kind of covering what is here, that the city manager has shown us covers the issue of solar as well. Okay. Now, is there any council reports?
Thank you, Mayor Garnes. Before you is maps of the last chance grade area, and there's several on the
Is your mic
table
on?
there.
Is your mic on?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
On the 8th of this month, we toured Green Diamond property in Del Norte County, and starting at the bottom of the page, the blue line is logging roads that are owned and maintained by Green Diamond Industries. And we drove up to, I guess you'd say, where you see a C and a D. And if you turn a couple pages, you'll see some cross sections for C and D, and they represent excavations that ultimately will be 120 to 140 feet deep. Also in this area, because it was accessible by Caltrans drill rigs, they had done borings in these at both C and D, and the material encountered is conducive with cuts of that magnitude. If we look at kind of like the top of the page, we'll see Route 101 and just kind of like parallel to the ocean, where it's a real problem. And alignment X would be trying to improve that existing alignment. Alignment L, a little bit further up the hill, would be mostly in excavation area, and it would be on the west side of the ridge. Alignment F is a tunnel that's $1 billion to $2 billion projected cost. And then we get into alignments A and C and A1 and A2. Probably the alignment that is going to be favored, at least by me, is one that takes off at alignment G and gets out of the park and then transitions into either A1 or A2. And A1 is a tunnel, A2 is a big bridge, and the tunnel would go under the state park and the bridge would go through the state park. But anyway, it was an interesting tour, and you get an idea of what's on the ground. There were about 35 folk that attended, and for the first time with this project, there was a representative from the North Coast Water Quality Control Board, and they're going to be a huge player ultimately in this project. I don't know how many of us will live long enough to see the road open. It looks like it's about 20 years from now. Wow. I'll be 94.
You'll still be running up Monument with your weights on.
Anyway, any questions?
So what do they do if it fails before, I mean, I know,
Yeah.
what's going to happen if it fails? Do they?
If it fails, like Caltrans would, I mean, it's failed many times, and it's been closed briefly many times over the last 40 years. They're working on an emergency contract today up there, and they will probably continue working on emergency contracts for the next 20 years until a road is open. if there's a total failure, why Caltrans will dig into the mountain and retreat. And that's always the first option. Retreat into the hillside.
Oh, what do you mean, just cut back a little
Cut
bit
back
farther?
further, yeah.
Even though it's not the optimum
Oh,
final?
It's not, no.
Okay.
Yeah. The optimum is, it may not even be any of these options that are listed here, because we're still, Caltrans is still relatively new in the process. Also, I might add that in the next several months, Caltrans will be advertising for consultants to start the process of preparing environmental documents, doing a lot of surveying out there, a lot more borings. They estimate the cost of that contract would be about $30 million. So it's a huge planning contract.
Thank you.
Yeah, on, mine was, I don't really have any council, RCA meets this Thursday, so I planning to go to that one. They're not as far along in some of their planning as they had talked about, but my one question was for future agendas. Is this the time to bring that up?
Sure.
We had a thing proposed by staff sometime back a month ago or 2 months ago about the Terrigen and trying to do some kind of a revenue sharing with the county. Yes. At the time, I didn't feel it was a time to move ahead with that. Since that time, I've talked to several members of the community, give it some thought, partly seeing how RCA has taken longer to do what they want to do for their negotiations, and it's what they told me today is it's just a lot more complicated a process. And so what I would like to suggest is that we bring it in a future meeting, whether that's next meeting or one after that. I don't know that we're in a dire drop dead hurry, but that the council would be able to discuss a path forward to get involved with revenue sharing with the county in the event that the Terrigen project goes through, that we're not waiting until it's done, and that is what's been brought forward to us by public comment, that we start a dialogue and work with our city attorney, and I think the city manager has talked about getting a professional, and he talked last time that would actually look at what revenue sharing agreements look like and how that would fit in. So that's my suggestion, that we agendize this if the council sees that's appropriate.
Well, I will ask the council. I, of course, brought it up the first time. I've been pushing for it, so I'm, of course, on board.
I spoke from the audience in favor of some sort of revenue sharing plan, and after that I talked to the city manager that if I ever got on council again, that it would be a point that I would certainly want to look into. Also, I suggested that the manager look into other cities, counties, special districts that may have had some kind of revenue sharing similar to this, so that we've got a basis to start with.
Thank you. Councilmember Woodall?
I'm willing to look at it.
Okay.
To look.
I hear you.
Yeah, I'm willing to look at it, although I will say the original letter, I did not like the wording in that letter. I think we needed to be clear that we are not in support, but if this happens, we definitely need some.
Okay, well, I think we have a consensus. City manager, if you can put that on the agenda, revenue sharing, that would be great. Thank you.
I do have a comment, I'm sorry, about our last HCOG meeting. We discussed about some issues locally, funding, money that HCOG had, and we moved to the front the Kenmar exit in Fortuna because it's becoming such a safety issue coming off of the freeway and getting backed up at the red light at Kenmar. They're talking about that's, of course, just in planning stages, just like the last chance grade, but something that would be moved certainly sooner than 20 years down the road. But putting in a roundabout or something there that's going to get that moving quicker. And it was, we didn't want to prioritize and say number one, but we moved it to the front of the list. So the state will look at it first. And then 12th Street exit also has some of the same issues in Fortuna, so.
Nice. Thank you. I went to the division meeting of the League of California Cities last, maybe 2 weeks ago. And one of the things that was talked about the most was the PG&E, the public service outages, and what they were doing, what different communities have been doing. And what they've been doing is some of the communities like Cloverdale, Lakeport, they've held community meetings where they would go and talk with groups at a time and kind of get them understanding exactly what PG&E is what could happen, and how they should prepare. So, you know, because there's a lot of confusion. Should I prepare for one day, have one bottle of water? Should I have, you know, this? Some people might think I need to have a whole room full of water. I need to have this or that. And so what they did was they sat down, different communities sat down with their community members and talked about this and hashed it out so that people got more comfortable as you could get with the idea that this could happen, but that if it does happen, what to do, how to be prepared, not at the last minute, but rather be prepared today for what's going to happen next month. And so I did talk to the city manager about that, and that's something that I would like if the council would agree to, that we agendize an item with so that we can talk about that, discuss it, and figure out, make a plan for not only us, but find a way to make a plan, help our community members make a plan as well, so that they're prepared as well as they can be prepared. Like when you brought up the hospital, those things that we think we should all know and we should all be prepared for, but you know, we aren't. So I think that if we could, as a council, figure out, you know, something we can put on the agenda where we can sit down, talk about it, get a plan for not only us in City Hall, but some way to reach out to our community, and so that everyone can be prepared.
Have something for Rio Dell.
Yeah,
Rio Dell,
absolutely.
Taylor.
Absolutely.
Like a community meeting?
Yes,
I'm not
but
just here at our
No, I don't
council
mean,
meeting.
no, I don't mean a council meeting. I mean a community meeting, and I don't mean just one community meeting because everybody can't make it, but different, more than one meeting at more than one time, not just 6 o'clock or 12 o'clock, but so that we can reach as many people as we can, so that if this does happen, and now that we found out that we might be safe, but we're apparently connected to people who aren't, so it could still affect us. So. Is that something?
I think that's a great
That's
idea.
a great idea.
That's a great idea.
All right, can we figure something out, Kyle? Or, okay, awesome. And is there a motion to?
No.
No, are we not? Did you?
No.
Oh my God, Julia.
Okay, I went to the fire department at their last meeting, and they're looking into an offer made by St. Joseph's Hospital to put in a resource center on their property right near the library. And they're going to take a look at all the options there. And
They've committed $500,000, St. Joe's already.
Yes.
They've committed it.
Okay, tomorrow we're going to have a nuisance abatement meeting at 3 o'clock. And my other thing is, Deborah, since you appoint to the committees and commissions, Gordon has said that he would take over the traffic committee for me.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if that is something I approach here or later, or can she just do it?
Can I just do it? I don't know, it's an agenda.
Karen question.
It's a Karen question, is that
Just
agenda?
be agendized to update the committee assignments.
Okay. So,
Simple agenda item.
okay,
Okay,
perfect. Thank you.
and that's it. We can do
Sorry,
it now.
I'm sorry, Julie, I didn't.
Oh, sure, after I told you.
Yeah, I know.
Madam Mayor, I move for adjournment.
I second.
Bam.